David.
All right, guys. So how are we doing today?
Good.
Fine.
Good.
Good.
Tired?
Fine.
Michael.
That's not fun.
In ELA, it smelled like chocolate.
Why? Are we doing good? Because it's a Monday? Is that
Monday? No.
Yes, today is Monday. Surprise, surprise.
Oh, it's today.
But yeah, just look at it this way. You're closer to the end than you are to the beginning. So that's
Wait, how many days do we have?
What does everything mean?
30.
That makes no sense.
30 days
Mr.
left.
Yo said 31.
Yeah.
Well,
We basically have a
you
month
might
and
want to trust Mr. Yost because he's a math teacher.
30 threw that on the video.
Yeah.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do, everybody get out your 8.2 review sheets. I will come around, check those, and then we'll go over it. And then we can get into what we have planned for today.
It only took the entire year, but
What time is it? Wilson. What?
took the entire year, but now I have one job. Yay. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we got it done. Nice.
I did it approximately 12 and then we answered 31 at night. Separate parts.
Did you just blow my hair?
No.
I actually went to bed today 10. And then
Oh,
we have Jeopardy on Monday. Do you?
David, I like how you said in just the beginning.
Howdy.
Howdy. Like as soon as it starts, howdy.
Yesterday,
That's what I was playing.
Prairie
The
Provinces.
triangles go with the triangles.
Oh yeah, that's today. I already got it.
Dude, how do you drink that in the bottle?
All right, cool, thank you.
You're being recorded ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So on Friday, we did section 8.2. We talked about the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region. Remember, it was these two provinces right here, Ontario and Quebec. Two very important provinces for Canada. Ontario having the largest population out of any province and a lot of different industries, things like that. And then going into number one, the other one is the largest province in all of Canada. What is the largest province?
Quebec.
Quebec, right? And we talked about one type of mountains in Quebec. What were they? The Laurentian Highlands, right. Number three, another name for the Hudson Bay Lowlands. The Canadian Shield, right. Remember this Canadian Shield up here? So the Canadian Shield, that was the thing where it had the really small layer of topsoil. Underneath that topsoil is a bunch of volcanic rock, very hard, very dense. Okay? The name of the fertile area in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region, this little green speck right here. David?
St. Lawrence Valley.
The St. Lawrence Valley, right. Remember that goes along the St. Lawrence River, a very important river to this region. So the name of the bay in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region, somebody over here? The Hudson Bay, right, this big bay up here. Second largest bay in the world and the largest bay in the world that freezes over at some point during the year. Then we have four Great Lakes that Canada shares with the United States. Give me one.
Ontario.
Lake Ontario.
Oh, Erie.
Lake Erie.
Huron.
Lake Huron, and the last one? Lake Superior, right. What is the one lake that is not shared?
Oh, Michigan.
Michigan, right. All right, so now back to the very important river in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region.
St. Lawrence River.
The St. Lawrence River, right? It connects Lake Ontario to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, thus connecting the Great Lakes to the ocean. All right, so that is very important. The five important metals mined in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region, give me one.
Iron.
Iron, gold,
Silver.
silver,
Copper.
copper, and uranium, right. All right, so we talked about two kinds of crops grown in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region. What are they? Fruits and veggies, right. And we had 4 cities, 4 important NHL cities. Give me one.
Montreal.
Montreal,
Toronto.
Toronto,
Ottawa.
Ottawa, and Quebec. All right, so that's our review sheet. Does anybody have any questions on 8.2 before we put that behind us? All right, just remember to study those review sheets for your upcoming test. When's our test? Tuesday, next Tuesday, right?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, Jeopardy is on Monday. All right, so if we don't have any questions on 8.2, we're going to start off today's discussion with a video that introduces our topic, the Prairie Provinces. All right, I figured you guys might want to break from reading, so we'd watch a video instead. So while we're watching this video, you don't have to take notes on specifics on the video, but you want to make mental notes on some of the things that you see, some of the things that you hear, things you think are important to this region, things that you think are interesting, different things like that. What you're going to find out is with this video and our entire discussion today, this region looks a lot like another region that we've talked about more specifically in the United States. So start making those connections and we'll see what we got at the end. So pay attention, be ready for a little bit of a discussion afterwards, and enjoy. Oh, not that one.
Spreading throughout Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta is a wide expanse of level land where grazing cows and farmlands are common sights. This is Canada's farming heartland, the Canadian Plains. Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta together are called the Prairie Provinces. Large areas of these provinces are sparsely populated. Most people reside in Calgary and Edmonton in Alberta, Winnipeg in Manitoba, and Saskatoon and Regina in Saskatchewan. Like the United States Midwest, much of this land in the southern regions of the Prairie Provinces was once a grass-covered prairie, but today it is covered in farms. Wheat, sunflower seeds, corn, oats, and barley grow here. It's the main grain-producing region responsible for feeding millions of Canadians. In fact, over 90% of all the wheat grown in Canada is from the Prairie Provinces. Because wheat is used to make bread, this area is called Canada's bread basket. This is farming on a large scale. Most of these farms are corporately owned. Only 8% of Canada's land area is good for farming. The rest of the land area is too cold or the soil is too rocky. But in the Prairie Provinces, the soil is fertile and the area receives ample rainfall. These provinces are not without challenges though, especially when it comes to the weather. In some years, unusually warm temperatures in the plains areas increase the numbers of grasshoppers, flea beetles, and cutworms that feed on the crops. These creatures can destroy entire crops if they are not controlled. Farmers depend on cold winter temperatures to kill many of the insect eggs. When the winters are not cold enough, the insect population soars. Droughts or periods of prolonged dryness can also seriously damage crops. Today, the Prairie Provinces are Canada's agricultural leaders. But they were once home to indigenous peoples and millions of buffalo that had lived there for centuries. The buffalo were nearly killed off after Europeans started arriving in Canada in the late 1800s. hunting buffalo became a popular sport. After railroads were built, the numbers of people hunting buffalo for sport soared. Today, their numbers have risen, and the traditions of the indigenous peoples continue. Native Americans in Alberta dance the traditional dances, some of which celebrate the buffalo. While the Prairie Provinces are leading agricultural provinces, farmland occupies only the southern parts of the provinces. To the north are mixed forests of evergreen and deciduous trees, which shed their leaves in the winter. The natural resources of the Prairie Provinces have made them ideal for growing many crops, especially wheat. Saskatchewan alone produces 2/3 of Canada's wheat. Canadians and people around the world depend on the crops grown and livestock raised in these provinces.
All right, so what do we think of the video? Interesting? We like it?
Oh, that's great.
All right, so now that we watched that video, stay in your seats, look left, look right, find a partner that's close to you, take a minute or two, talk about the important things that we saw in the video, things that we liked, things that we think we're going to be talking about today, so the bigger significant things. Go ahead.
What did you see? What did you see? Obviously, we're talking about prairies because that's literally in the title.
Yeah.
About their land farming. How their land, like, I know
They say I want to say, go home, cat. I want
What's it look like? What other region does it look like?
Midwest.
Yes, the Midwest. Good job.
Yeah, because they all have like barley.
yeah, page, page,
People.
prepare.
They
Shut up.
should do it in the video. Why would you?
Anthony,
You did.
Anthony, stop. Anthony.
No, he's not gonna do that because that's the. He's gonna do it.
That thing's on?
No, he's not gonna do it because it'll be bad on his part, the supervisor.
Yeah.
No, what?
Yes, it would because it's for after ears.
Bam! All right, ladies and
You just
gentlemen.
got me really scared.
Yeah.
Maddie,
Call transitions
sarcasm.
All right, so what did we talk about? What did we see in the video?
Flatlands, prairie.
Flatlands and prairies. Listen up, guys. Listen up. So we got flatlands and prairies. What are flatlands and prairies good for?
Farming.
Farming, right? There's a lot of farming going on in the video. So flatlands, prairies, farming sounds a lot like the American Midwest, right? What else have we seen in the video? Things that caught our attention. Anything else? Yeah, there were some trains in there. Trains were very big when they were introduced to this region.
The buffalo hunting.
The buffalo hunting, right?
The native thing.
The Native Americans, buffalo hunting were very important to this region and growing. So another thing that we should pull from this video, so we saw all these pictures and videos of the farmlands. What did we see off in the background? Mountains. What kind of mountains do we think these were? Which ones? Any idea? Any guesses? The Rocky Mountains, right?
Wait, the Canadian Rocky?
Yeah, the Canadian Rocky Mountains. So remember when we introduced the Rocky Mountains? They start up here in Alaska. They go all through Canada, down through the United States and into Mexico. And the first time we're going to see these is in this region, as they're in the southwest part of Alberta. So very similar area to the American Midwest. You have a lot of flat land. Out in the west, you have the Rocky Mountains. Okay, so very similar stuff. but yet they do have a lot of stuff that make them unique. So the Prairie Province region, sometimes we call them the interior plains, as they're in the interior part of the continent. So we're looking at 3 provinces today. Does everybody know what they are?
Alberta, Saskatchewan, and I can't say the board.
Alright, so we got Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba.
I said it.
No, you didn't.
What do you mean? No one can
David, stop being mad. Don't need to be salty.
Alright, so we got these provinces here. Out to our west, we have what province?
What for our west home?
To the west of Alberta,
British Columbia.
British Columbia. On the east, what's the
Ontario.
Ontario, right? To the north, we have 3 territories, and to the south, we have the good old United States. So that's our borders for this region. All right, so of course we have our friendly little Mountie. He's gonna keep taking us on our tour of Canada.
I don't like that.
No,
He
we
must
wouldn't.
be tired.
Doesn't he get tired of doing that pose though?
Probably not. He looks comfortable, I would say.
Really false off.
All right, so starting off, we're gonna have our landforms. The biggest one that we have, and of course it's going to dominate most of the region and how things are done, is plains. Like I said, we call them the interior plains, as they're right here in the middle of the continent. These plains, along with the American Midwest, make the heart of North America. As we can see, it's pretty well the center of everything. And our other type of landform are mountains. We have the Canadian Rockies out in southwestern Alberta. Here we can see this line represents where the main part of the Rocky Mountains are at. And here we have Alberta. You can see the red stretches down into it. And of course we have a picture of the Rocky Mountains. Remember, very tall, very jagged, of course very rocky. Very high in elevation, so you're going to see snow on them all year round. High in elevation means they are low in temperature. So then water bodies. This is something that makes it a little bit different from the American Midwest. When we talk about the Midwest, we really didn't have too many bodies of water to talk about. Today we have a couple important ones. First one is the Saskatchewan River. So we see this river is right here, this blue line. Starts over here in Alberta, goes through Saskatchewan and into Manitoba. So this river isn't as important today as it was back in the time of the Native Americans. This isn't a very big river. Think of it like our Susquehanna River close to here. So the Native Americans, when they were roaming this area before English and French people showed up, started colonizing, they would use this river to travel back and forth. They knew the importance of waterways, just like you guys do, right? So these Native Americans, they would go back and forth along this river, moving, taking supplies. They could use it to hunt, fish, things like that. Then the settlers show up. And as we saw in the video, it talked about buffalo. The settlers were looking for furs from the buffalo, beavers, otters, things like that. So they would travel up this river into Alberta where they could hunt. Obviously this was farther out in the territory, so there was less people, more animals. They could hunt, skin their kills, and then they could bring them all the way back along the river into Lake Winnipeg, and from there it was just a short trip to Ontario where they could sell their goods. And that's how a lot of them made money. So that takes us to our next body of water, Lake Winnipeg. All right, where that star is there. Lake Winnipeg is a pretty big body of water. It is the third largest lake that Canada has full control of. So obviously the Great Lakes are going to be bigger. as you can see from this map here. But Canada shares those Great Lakes with the United States, so that means Lake Winnipeg is the third largest lake fully controlled by Canada. So being a large lake, you'd probably think that it would be important for shipping, stuff like that, like we talked about other lakes in the past, but it's really not. As big as it is, looking at it from the sky, it's not very deep, okay? What's up, guys? So Lake Winnipeg's average depth is 39 feet, which really isn't that deep when you're looking at a lake. The Great Lakes, you're looking at average depths of 200 feet. So this is really nothing comparatively. You can't really float big ships in this lake because there's just not enough water, all right? So this lake, not so important for fishing, or not so important for shipping, but it is very good for fishing. People come from all over the country to go camping at it. It is very nice for recreation. And then our final body of water, we have the Hudson Bay. Of course, Manitoba borders the Hudson Bay. We've talked about that before. The second largest bay in the world. Largest bay in the world that freezes over completely at some point in the year. So on to resources. The biggest resource for this area is fertile soil, all right? So this fertile soil, very important for the farming that we've been talking about. And if we look at the American Midwest, where did the soil come from for the Midwest? The fertile soil that made it so good. You guys remember? Glaciers, right? So during the Ice Age, glaciers froze starting in the north and they pushed south. Obviously started in the colder regions, started getting where it was warmer as the air temperature went down, and it pushed a lot of the fertile soil from the Prairie Province region down into the American Midwest. So the fertile soil that makes our Midwest so good for farming, so good for different things like that, that came from the Prairie Province region, all right? So there's a lot of fertile soil here. Then we have fossil fuels like coal, oil, and nat gas. These resources are all connected in some way. So what do we need for fossil fuels? What needs to happen?
Renewable in the lifetime.
They are renewable, not necessarily in a lifetime. But what is fossil fuels? The answer is right in the word. Fossil fuels. You need fossils, right? What are fossils? Bones, carcasses of dead animals, right? So, we can tell this fertile soil has been in the region for thousands of years, because if there's a lot of fossils, that means there's going to be a lot of fossil fuels. These fossils came from animals that were eating other animals, which were eventually eating a lot of vegetation, lots of grasses, things like that, right? So obviously, thousands of years ago, there had to be fertile soil for these plants to grow so that these animals could grow. Eventually, those animals die, get pushed under the ground. After thousands of years, that pressure pushes down and turns them into fossil fuels. So that is why coal, oil, and natural gas are very prominent in this area. It all goes back to the fertile soil. As far as coal goes, they have anthracite and bituminous. Remember, I was talking about coal. Anthracite coal is hard coal. We have it here in Pennsylvania. And bituminous coal, soft coal, more prominent in Ohio and West Virginia. So into industries, obviously with our fertile soil, the biggest is going to be farming. Lots of grain farming happens in Canada. Wheat, corn, oats, barley, and soybeans, very important crops. Farming is very difficult in Canada. So as we talked about here in our region, our growing season is a little bit shorter than what they have in places, say like Florida, down south, Georgia. So we can't grow as many things as they can. It's even worse in Canada. In Canada, these farmers are facing a 120-day growing season. All right, that's about a third of the year. That's not a lot of time at all when you're looking at growing crops to support your entire livelihood. So they have to worry about these cold winters. They have to worry about winter coming early, extending late. That really makes their season a lot shorter. It makes them move a lot faster, and it puts them under a lot more pressure than what farmers in this area can see. Of course, if we have lots of grains and grasslands on a flat area, we're going to have livestock as well. So they can keep them all in nice big pens, let them out to pasture, let them eat the things that they got to do. So beef and dairy cattle, pigs, and poultry are big in this region. What's poultry? Everybody? Chickens, right. So just like the American Midwest, we have the same types of livestock going on. Has anybody ever been to Canada? No. Does anybody know how they package milk in Canada? So you want a gallon of milk, you go to the store, you can't just buy a jug of milk. It is not in a carton either. They put them in bags. They put them in plastic bags. So, and you're not going to be buying them by the gallon, you're going to be buying them by the liter. So you got your liter bag, and what you usually do is you bring your, usually they put like a couple in a bag at once. So you bring home your bag of bags, and you have a pitcher that you usually keep in your fridge, whatever, and then you have to take scissors, cut off the end of the bag, and dump it into your pitcher so that you have milk.
Why?
2 reasons, does anybody know? Save on plastic, that is a big one. Canada is way ahead of us when it goes to recycling. Those big plastic chugs that we put our gallons in, half gallons, pretty much any of our milk in, they take up a lot of space in landfills, plus they put a lot of plastic in the landfills. These bags that they put them in are very thin, okay, so it's not putting as much waste into the landfill. You know what else they do to keep up with recycling? If you go to Walmart, you get groceries. They're really trying to limit the plastic use in the country so much that if you go to Walmart, you buy groceries, and you decide to have plastic bags, you got to pay a couple cents for every bag that you use. So they will count the bags that they use for your groceries, and they will charge you for them. So a lot of people up there, they take reusable bags, or they just don't use bags at all. Okay, and the other reason that they put milks in bags is that it's cheaper packaging. Okay, so you don't got to make all these jugs. All you have to do is put them into these weird sacks of milk. So, another industry of the region, mining and drilling. Of course, you have an abundance of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. You got to have means of getting that out of the ground. All right. And then the last thing we got to get through for our notes is the cities. Remember, we're going by the NHL teams because that's where some of the biggest cities are. All right, so we got 3 for this region. First one, Calgary, Alberta, home of the Flames. Then we have Edmonton, Alberta, home of the Oilers. And does anybody know the last one begins with a W?
Winnipeg?
It is Winnipeg. Winnipeg, Manitoba, home of the Jets. Alright, so once you guys have all of those copied down into your notes, you can put your notes away. That's all we got to write down, okay?
Short. It felt short.
Yeah, it's 'cause we had a lot of fun, right? Time flies when you're having fun.
Which is good, at least we don't get carpal tunnel.
That's true. No carpal tunnel for us today.
Yes.
Alright, so we have 2 choices. I will let them up to you. We can either partner study maps and then go over them together as a group, and I will give you guys your review sheet after we go together as a group,